Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the discussion today on the backlog that never shrinks, a real look into how you can scale risk and compliance operations from an AI standpoint. A few more housekeeping items. As the video mentioned, we will have polls throughout. So as you hear us bring up that we will have polls, there will be three. And so please feel free, excited to hear what the results of those are, doing a little pulse point there so we can see what everyone is seeing and feeling from an AI perspective. And then in addition, the second housekeeping item, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat feature. We will get to as many as we have time for today. And we will do that at the end. So if there are some that we do not get to, we can follow up with you after. All right, so let's dive in. So first, quick introduction. Sarah Seguin, I am your host moderator for this session, and I am an advisor here at Alloy. I've been with Alloy almost 4 years, but prior to joining Alloy, I came from the banking side. I was in banking for a little over 17 years, always in the fraud and identity space. So great transition over to Alloy. But without further ado, I'm really excited to have with me Micah Weaver and Sam Swift. So Micah, let me just turn it to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me on today. I'm Micah Weaver. I'm the fraud data and technology lead here at United Community. Been in the tech space for going on 10 years now, which is kind of crazy to say, but the last 3 years have been spent at United Community, leading most recently our fraud technology program. So looking at all of our systems, how do we optimize those systems and also leverage the data within those systems. So AI, I think, is a really interesting topic. I was happy to jump on when I got the opportunity for this. So looking forward to discussing more today.
Great. Thank you again, Micah. We're happy to have you. Sam?
Absolutely, yeah, and also glad to be here. I'm Sam Swift. I lead the engineering teams here at Alloy, which deliver our intelligence features. So those are our AI features, our machine learning features, all of the things that help accelerate delivering the value through the product. I've been in the New York tech scene for also, 10, 12 years, and have worked doing machine learning and AI work in a number of different industries, and have loved figuring out how to apply those tools to this problem space.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Really excited to hear from you today as well. So let's walk through the agenda before we dive into it. So first, we will kick off with the mounting pressure. So what we recognize and what we are hearing from our clients is the pressure to invest in AI, the pressure to implement and do so quickly in order to combat the threats as well as maintain efficiency. We will then dive into where AI agents fit. So if you are keeping tabs on the industry, you see that there is a lot of opportunity out there. We're really going to boil it down to what can it look like and where AI agents are best suited to work. And then, okay, so what does good look like? So we'll walk through that as well from an innovation standpoint, and then we will move into Q&A. So one of the things from a mounting pressure standpoint, right, this true adoption shift. And, what we have really seen is a shift in, for a while it was, should we do it? Are we going to do it? What is that investment going to be? And we're long past that, right? The conversation now is how fast can we implement? How fast can we move to production and really understand the efficiencies and start to see some success there? So again, no longer split between exploring and ignoring AI. We are here. We are in it. So with that, one of the things, Micah, that we see is 91% of banks rank AI as a up quartile or highest priority, right? Significant uptick there. And in this survey, we really would want to hear from you. We know banks are investing, right? The survey is saying it, we're hearing it in the industry, but from your perspective that you are living and breathing it every day, what does this look like from your standpoint, right? So from a leadership place, is leadership ready to support this and the org as well? Because it is a lot more than saying, yes, let's move fast and click of a button. What is your take on that one?
Yeah, 100%. I think moving fast and implementing AI is kind of scary just in general for a lot of people to hear because it does involve so much. But at the same time, from our perspective, I think it's balancing that, speed to implement, but also the governance that goes around AI. So that's a hard thing to balance sometimes. But I think our organization has really put the people in place first to be able to not only implement but also monitor and analyze those systems. I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and we put those certain systems or tools in place, and we don't even have the people to manage them. So we've really put a focus on that, which I think helps to balance that trade off.
So ultimately, Micah, what I'm hearing too is when you put a framework and the system in place, then that actually can help you move faster. So even if it takes a little bit more time up front to put that framework in place, you can move that much faster on the back end because everything is already aligned, ready to move forward. Is that fair
100%.
statement?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Making sure I think that you have the structure, the processes, the people in place before you just, say, hey, we have this new tool to use and just put it in without any of that set up. I think that sets you up for success 100%.
That's great. And so we know the demand is there, right, from an organizational structure. But we also know that from a fraudster standpoint, that it is already being exploited. AI is being heavily used in the fraud space. So annually, Alloy conducts a state of fraud report, and it really surveys over 500 of industry leaders, everyone from fintech to larger institutions, community banks, credit unions, to really understand what are you seeing in the space and where are you going to make investments moving forward. One of the questions related to AI was asking, what are you seeing? How many of your cases, how many alerts are really being driven by the fraudsters using AI? 91% of decision makers noticed that more financial crimes were being committed with AI technology. So what this tells us is not only we know that the fraudsters are using it and achieving some success with it, certainly they're making the investments. And organizationally on the bank side, the manual review cannot keep up, right? So we would love to move as fast as the fraudsters. We have things such as governance, but the manual review components, whether it's rising operational costs, the long review times, the customer experience, reduced net revenue growth, organizationally, we cannot keep up if changes are not made. And so there's really all of these compounding effects to where do we go from here and what investments need to be made. So let's see what this audience is experiencing as well. So going to start with a poll here. The question is, how is your manual review backlog trending over the past 12 months? Growing faster than we can staff for it? It is growing but manageable? It is holding steady? Or it is shrinking? And if it is shrinking, we would love to hear all of your secrets on how it is shrinking. Or you've already implemented AI, perhaps, to help with that backlog. So we still have some respondents coming in with their answers. We'll just give another second or two. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results here. Growing but manageable is leading the pack here, well over half at 54%. We still have some holding steady at 21%, 18 growing faster than we can staff for it, and 7% shrinking, which is fantastic because I will be the first one to say I did not expect to see a number over 5 in that bucket. So Micah, Sam, what is your initial reaction? Are you surprised by this response? Anything you top of mind that you would attribute it to?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I was going to answer the same. I think it's somewhere between holding steady and growing, but manageable. The key, I think, is with AI specifically is, we have a current, backlog, let's say that's manageable, but how can we make that more efficient by adding AI in, which is always the question I think at hand. But I would certainly say I would agree with, where we're sitting, growing, but manageable right now. Sam, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that if you agree or not.
Yeah, I think one question just to put out there and for everyone who's sort of planning for the future of their institution is growing but manageable right now. How do we think that's going to trend? To Sarah's previous slide on the attacker space being quick to innovate. If today we can handle the growth of new threats and changing concerns, do we want to bet that that's how it's going to keep going in the 12 months after that, or should we get in a position to react to that in advance? I think there's also, every organization encounters, uh, a new business line or an acquisition or these other moments where something shifts in the operational context that like all of a sudden it's not manageable, and those are the situations we often hear about.
Great points from both of you. And Sam, I'll just double click in because you said something that, it may be manageable today, but it is the question mark for the future, because we all know that if there is a fraud incident or an attack, who really hits the brunt of it is the operational team, right? That whether it's the volume of cases that has to be created, reviewed, worked, account status, if you do not have that all in a systemic process, that is very challenging. So it makes it very hard to manage if that occurs. Okay, we will move right into our second poll for today. So we talked a little bit about the manual review. What does it look like? But now let's take one step deeper. Where does manual review consume the most time on your team today? Fraud alerts, triage, AML alerts and transaction monitoring, KYC, KYB and onboarding review, or disputes and document review. I'm very interested to hear this, equally interested to hear this response as well from the group we have here today. There may be some of you wondering, well, I feel like they're all at a high bucket, which is sometimes what we hear speaking to a peer saying, where do you want me to start last week? How do we really dissect when those volumes are so high? Okay, it looks like our responses are slowing down here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the responses. Okay, AML alerts and transaction monitoring leading here at 39%, followed by fraud alerts, triage at 24%. So really AML, I mean, that's even between AML and fraud. Yes, they're in the top 1 and 2 spots, but still a pretty big gap there between the two. Micah, Sam, initial reactions to this one. Micah, how would you have responded? Sam, what are you seeing, hearing?
Yeah, I think from my side, I would probably say the fraud alerts and triage. But at the same time, like you said, I think this speaks to the difference of opinion depending on your institution and what you're dealing with. There's all of these at certain points throughout the year could be answered as a top priority. So I definitely think it depends on your organization and your sector kind of what you're dealing with. So it's very interesting to see the results, to be honest.
Mike, Sam, anything you would add there?
Yeah, I think the sort of the relationship between the pressure on onboarding versus the pressure on transaction monitoring or the ongoing concerns is really an interesting sort of reflection of business dynamics and how aggressively you're growing. And once you grow, what those customers are onboarding to, whether they're onboarding to products that you've been running for 10 years and are running very smoothly, or some of the newer offerings that you might be trying to get into the market, which likely ends up flagging higher on as the processes, as the rules get evolved and defined. So yeah, this is a great sort of profile of the group. I'm sure everybody has their own story of how these mix.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you both. So again, thank you everyone for responding to the polls because it really helps to level set just as a group here what everyone is seeing and experiencing. And this also helps to shift on the why just hire more breaks down. So for years, there was a concept in fraud that just throw more bodies at the problem. That is not sustainable. The cost associated with that is quite significant. And then you layer on the bad actors using AI, they can scale infinitely very quickly, which makes hiring more costly, more challenging for many reasons. So really, this starts to become a structural problem, whether it's the training cycles, it is the management overhead, and then again, being exploited from an AI perspective with the bad actors, organizations need to be able to move just as quickly and scale their own AI programs in order to address the threat there. So, Micah, we've heard this in the industry that, how can you really gain the efficiency components from an AI perspective, but it's also beyond efficiency, right? It's also really from a risk perspective and leveling out the playing field against the fraudsters. But if we went deeper into the technology component, as you think about your technology roadmap, how does the rising alert volume factor into that conversation? So that's something, you answered, that's what you would have said in the poll. Are you thinking about that volume? Is it a hiring cost problem? Is it a speed problem? Customer experience first? How do you frame that?
I think it's unfortunately sometimes it can be all the above. I think what's really interesting about that is, like you said, if you're going to continue to hire, sure, you can throw more people to that problem, but then you have to train those people. They might have different level of experiences. You're, increasing their or decreasing their bandwidth when you have more and more alerts come in. So it's human nature to possibly overlook something or make the wrong decision. So I think the capacity standpoint is something that is really in the forefront of my mind when we're looking at increasing alerts of how those our agents can handle those alerts on a day-to-day basis with them increasing. And really, as we scale as an organization, how, like Sam said earlier, it might not be a problem currently today, but who says 6 months from now, a year from now, that's something that now we can't handle. We're trying to rush to hire more people. And I think that's alert volume is one of the key indicators for us, to make sure that we're understanding, is that something they can handle, or do we need to add more help, whether that's a person or, in this case, AI?
Yeah, Micah, that's great feedback. Is that something like you see it as a now problem, right? Something that you've already started to look at and build around. Are you running and looking at metrics from a key risk perspective, like key risk indicators to say, even though we have a pulse point on it, we may need to shift direction and lean in a little more in this area? Is this something that you are really keeping an eye on day over day or month over month?
Yeah, so from an alert and case standpoint, we for sure are. I think when we get into, and we'll talk about this probably later on, but some of the other, metrics, cost per investigation, let's say, I think those are really what you're looking at of like what's the cost this is adding to the organization, and what's the difference, especially when you start looking at some of these tools with AI of what's the ROI over time that they can provide versus what we currently have done over the past across the industry is just like you said, add more people to the problem as a solution. I think that we have the ability now to look outside of that.
That's great. There's a pretty significant risk there. I think we all can agree that there are real stakes of getting it wrong. And it is not just in your organization that there's efficiency issues. There's definitely two sides of getting this wrong. There is the customer standpoint of if you get it wrong and do not make the investment and move into production, slower decisions, incorrect denials, you're eroding that trust. And once you start to erode that trust, cannot deepen those relationships. You are no longer primary, et cetera. But internally for your institution, then we know the sheer volume, right? The compounding of the fraud losses, your exposure, concerns from a regulator perspective, and you can really start to cap from on your growth. So we know that that's a risk. And interestingly, Canopy put out a report, and they noted that AML, KYC, and fraud detection remained the least mature AI use case of any one measured. Only 38% of banks reported it had reached a POC, pilot, or production at that time, which I think is, to me, shocking. But where to really lean in there is we know the time is now. We'll talk about barriers a little bit further into the session, but starting to think of there are very real repercussions of getting it wrong. And we're probably not moving as fast from an industry and organizational perspective as folks want to be moving, because the benefits that can be gained from KYC, AML, fraud standpoint of using agents is pretty significant. So we'll get into that too. But Micah, sticking with you just for another moment, right, on the institutional side, when you take this problem to leadership, that there's real stakes to getting it wrong, that others may not be completely there yet. How do you frame the risk, the cost, the experience, regulatory readiness? Like, how do you frame that for your leadership team and really build the business case around it?
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about AI is the last couple of years, it felt like every conference I went to, AI was one of the main topics of the conversation. The difference is this past year, in my personal experience, so many of the vendors that we work with, they have the ability to implement this now, and it's not something, hey, down the road we can do this, or this is something we're working on. So number one, framing it as this is something that's currently available. We're not having to push this down the road. Is important. But at the same time, I think coming from a technology perspective, making sure that we are not framing it as just a new technology, but really framing it as a business problem and a business case of where we currently stand as a business from a cost perspective. Like you said, I think a huge one, especially in the community banking industry, is the customer friction, right? And the erosion of trust that we have, and what AI can do to keep that trust. When you look at onboarding someone, if it takes, X amount of time to get that manual review done, that could erode the trust of that, community bank if they're talking to their friends or whatever have you. So I think that framing it as a business problem and not just some new fancy technology is kind of the way that I would look at it.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's great. And, question for you as we talk about really framing it as the business problem, what does the buy-in process look like for you working across, whether it's fraud operations, compliance, technology teams? The problem may appear differently for them, but yet implementing is going to help them solve different issues that they're having as well, right? It really starts to have benefit across multiple areas. How do you get that buy-in from, on that business problem?
Well, I think you answered it right there. It's really just making sure that they understand how this tool is going to, better their department, better their perspective. That it's not just a fraud problem; it's a risk problem. It's a compliance problem. There's so many areas that AI in this case can benefit, from their perspective. So making sure that that is understood. And I think at the end of the day, having a shared objective. At the end of the day, we're doing this for the customers, making sure that they have protection from a fraud perspective, and then also making sure that they're getting quicker and more efficient decisions being made. So making sure that that shared objective is kind of at the central focus point when we're presenting something like that.
That's great. So truly the shared objective becoming that high level, ensuring that they all have the opportunity to feed into that, so then they can see the metrics that they can each achieve.
Yep, 100%.
So let's move a little bit into where AI agents fit. So Are many opportunities as we think about, distinct use cases. But where I would take us one further is I would say, yes, when you're thinking about your process today, you may be thinking procedural wise of, okay, I need to complete KYC. I have certain types of fraud detection alerts. It could be EDD, CDD, watch list, et cetera. But really, the shift also becomes where do you not have automation today? So if you strip down from some of those use cases and take a step back, where can your AI agents fit if we didn't tell you we had a certain agent for that use case? And so it's just a different way to think about if you have any manual review challenges, just imagine an AI agent being put into that process. So Sam, you're innovating, you are behind the scenes, you are hands-on. Walk us through here. There are many listed. A few areas we know that AI agents are delivering success stories. But Sam, of these five, which is genuinely the easiest starting point for an institution today, and which is deceptively hard? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you see these sort of five different, technical process areas, things you're really familiar with as a professional in this industry. And it's sort of, I could imagine it being appealing to say, all right, this is where you start. This is always the best entry point. This one's easy. We know we do this one overnight and this one takes a long time. It's actually more a story about your organization and your processes. So what we find actually is that the easiest one to get started with is the one where you feel like you have the clearest statement of the process and the desired process. It might actually be something that you've introduced fairly recently because that's where the team is fresh, the training is fresh, the processes are using sort of the latest systems that you prefer to use and all those things. The ones that can be deceptively complex are the ones actually that it's the process you've been running for 12 years without making a big change. And the team that's embedded in that process knows everything about how, we'll get a sort of a first draft description of the process from a customer. They'll say, yeah, it's just, step 1, 2, and 3. And we work on implementing that. And we say, we're not coming up with the same decisions that you are. And that's when we'll reveal, we'll shadow someone who's intimately familiar with the process, and it'll reveal, oh, well, after step 2, you have to go check this other system and see if you see anything there. And so there are these systems that are deeply ingrained in the organization and in the team. And those are the ones where it's actually sometimes challenging, but also quite revealing and enlightening to really figure out what is the process that's happening here. If I want an AI agent to be able to do this work, we really need to be able to describe to it what is the goal, what is the information, what are the criteria. And so I think it's often surprising to organizations which of their processes are actually easy to describe accurately and completely, and which ones have a lot of tribal embedded knowledge and things that need to be really sort of, you have to do your sociology to go around the group and really figure out everything you need to know about the process. But all of these are viable, right? These are all on this page because if a person is looking through information, following guidelines to judgment, and trying to reach a set of predetermined outcomes, that's a candidate for something where an AI agent can help at the very least accelerate and synthesize and set that agent, that human analyst up for a decision, or at best take that off their plate and move that case forward in the appropriate direction.
That's great, Sam. So what I'm hearing, all viable from this slide, and then some, right? So it's a little bit of an unlock of don't be limited by what you see on a screen or by what your 1 through 4 process, or I even say guideline, shows that, sitting down with your partner and really building and going through the iterations, and the acceleration can be there. Just sitting down, partnering, and building that agent is really where you can win.
And if that's sort of a little bit too broad of a direction, I think the next thing I would look to is, what are there a lot of? Where do you have a day where 500 new things can enter the queue? Which one of these processes just has the sort of most intimidating volume prospects, because the computer is not scared of volume, right? If you can figure out how to get it to work once and twice, 500 is also fine. And so, watch list screening is a great example of that. It's really common to see processes where one entity, a person or business, will generate hundreds of potential hits for adverse media or things that need to be reviewed. And combing through all of that is often really challenging for a team to sort of know how to prioritize, or what's the appropriate process for that. So if one of these in your organization has the property of being like really spiky, or really sort of, sometimes we just get flooded with these, that's a great place to start, because taming the flood is something that can really help you build stronger process relationships to that responsibility in that queue.
That's great. That's great advice, Sam. Thank you. So, staying along the same lines, but what makes a good AI agent? So we have a bit of a list here, right? For the agents and what good looks like. Sam, we have 4 listed here. I'm guessing you could probably provide more, but if we just look at these 4 here, which of these 4 is most often overlooked by banks evaluating AI agents for the first time?
Yeah, I think this list is actually a great jumping off point. I'm so excited about this technology and about the opportunities to deliver a financial system that we can all trust more and benefit from more. I do also, as a proponent, sometimes feel like I have to admit I didn't invent this technology, right? I didn't make Claude. We all have access to this technology. And so actually we can all be excited about it and use it in different ways, at home in the kitchen and here, designing our processes. The question, and where I sort of, my team try to apply our technology tools, is how can we make that pragmatically useful to you in your environment with the work that you need to do? And to Micah's earlier point, sort of like adoption is all about explaining how this could be easier. You could be having better outcomes. You could be scaling to this challenge better. And so when you take this amazing technology that has so much exciting potential, and everyone has access to, the question is, can you put that technology in a context that allows it to do useful things for you with the problems you have? And that's really what this list is what does that technology need to embed in your business problem to be able to do useful things? And so just going top to bottom here, there needs to be a way to explain to the agent what you want to happen in your business, right? Claude and ChatGPT, they don't know what you consider risky or what types of decisions your business has made about the trade-offs between, growth and risk, or compliance and transparency, right? The technology itself is neutral to all of those things. So we need to be able to weigh. There needs to be a way for you to tell it the things that you care about. And I think about this as really parallel to training, right? When you hire someone new, how do you tell them what to look out for, what's important, how to value different pieces of information and trade-offs? So feeling like this is not an out-of-the-box solution, right? If the tool doesn't ask you anything about what you want it to do, then that's a little bit worrisome, because you need to tell it. It's your business. Then if you want it to do a job, the tool has to be in a situation where it can do something, right? You don't want more text being generated everywhere in the world, right? We can now generate as much text as anyone will ever read, every minute of the day. And so if you want to be accelerating your processes and moving your business forward, the AI tooling needs to be in a place in your process, in your systems, where it can do things for you, right? Where it can actually resolve things and take things off of people's plate. And so that raises questions about what are the systems of record, what are the places where you want to disposition a case as open or closed. How are you going to take this AI synthesis and processing of information and get that button clicked so that that thing gets resolved and put in the right pile afterwards? And just like all IT projects, right, there's a lot of wiring together boxes and integrating things, and sort of asking those questions up front is really the shortest route to am I going to be experiencing a real relief here, or are we going to be talking about integration plans for 3 years? And then, the thing that makes these LLMs so powerful is that they're able to process such a variety of different kinds of information and do useful things. But that means you need to be able to give it information. So a lot of the processes that we end up uncovering involve human agents who are typing into this computer the identifier for a customer, and then going over here to this one or this other browser tab and typing in that same number and looking it up in that system. And so the AI is not going to be able to swivel around and ask the other department to look this up in another system, right? The question is, how can you design a system where you put that tool in a position where it has access to both internal data about the decisions you want it to make, as well as potentially external, so vendor information or even things like web searches. We see a lot of cases where to figure out if an adverse media hit is concerning, you need to piece together the rest of the puzzle. You need to figure out, do some more learning about the situation. And so the moral of the story here really is, can you put this extremely exciting, promising technology into a seat in your business, in your process, where it has access to being able to do the work and the information to do that work, and feedback and instructions about if it's doing it well and how you want it to act.
I think that's great, Sam. There's a lot to, like, you just shared so much good information there on how to think about it, how to unpack it. All great intel. But I want to stick on that theme because, sticking with internal information, external information, we also have the humans in the loop. So often we are asked, how and when do we keep humans in the loop? And not only as part of the process, but, Micah mentioned earlier in the call, governance, right? So we start to think about the MRM components, the auditability, et cetera. So Sam, can you kind of walk us through here? We know that institutions, they want to move forward. They want to be able to trust it. And part of that trust is keeping humans in the loop when and where appropriate. So what is the mechanism that really makes AI decision explainable to an examiner, not just an engineer, to help everyone with that trust?
Yeah, it's something that I hope no one would ask you to sort of like take a leap of faith on this, right? Don't worry, the AI will do it all well. You wouldn't expect that. I like to just do a lot of parallels to people. Would you put a brand new person you've never met in the seat and tell them to just make all these decisions without writing down what happened and making sure that they're doing the right process? You wouldn't, and your organization wouldn't be comfortable with that. And so we have the same expectations here. The first is to get comfortable being able to observe, being able to measure and compare AI agent outcomes before they are the decision of record, right? So being able to sort of like explore and make sure you can monitor and investigate that before it's what really counts. But then once it is doing that job and it is in the load bearing production solution, I think it's always completely reasonable to ask, are we taking each one of these steps in the process and documenting which information we used, which policy or directive was relevant, and how we came to the decision, potentially including countervailing indicators, right? We had the state didn't, the address didn't match, but everything else did. And so by our policy, that seems like, in general, it seems safe to dismiss that kind of decision making. And one thing I like to do as a thought experiment is imagine the sort of whatever notes system you have or audit trail for the decisions that your team is making today. If you picked one at random from the last 18 months, how confident are you that it would be complete and thorough and descriptive and really explain the rationale of how the decision was made? In my experience, you do see some employees doing a really great and thorough job, or for some periods of time you have a lot, but often you get copied and pasted, 5-word dismissed for low risk type of notes that explain what happened. And you can actually, sort of once you get comfortable, expect much more reliably comprehensive descriptions of what happened when it's the AI agent writing down what happened, right? So if there are, again, I'll go back to the adverse media, watch list hits example, just because the volume problem is so dramatic there often. Um, each one of those dismissed hits is going to come with, we looked at this and we checked this and we searched for anything else corroborating and we compared, and it comes to section 2B of our policy, which says if it's not more than 3, then we dismiss, right? You'll get that kind of audit trail on every single decision. No one will read 99% of those ever, right? And you don't want to. That's not something you want to be spending your time doing. But when it comes to auditing, or when it comes to sort of explaining a case where there's been some concern, you can always pull that up. And so this is actually a great example of computers don't mind doing that work over and over and over and over again, and that's really helpful in this context.
It most certainly is, for those that are constantly trying to figure out event logs and audit logs and where to pull them from. To Sam's point, computers don't mind doing that. So it can really be placed in one spot. So we're going to move into our last poll of this session, really sticking along the theme of the barrier to adoptions. We know that data privacy and security, are certainly top of mind there. So we'd love to hear from you. What is the biggest barrier to adopting or scaling AI in your operations? Explainability, model risk and governance, getting foundational workflows in place first, budget or unclear ROI, and lastly, internal AI policy is still being defined. We will give everyone a moment here to finish submitting their answers. After this poll, to give you some context and to reminder what's coming next is looking at the AI operating model. Sam and Micah will walk us through the metrics and that model, what that looks like. And as we're seeing some responses slow down here, Micah, Sam, let's take a look at the results. Okay, explainability, model risk, and governance, leading at 38%, but closely behind getting foundational workflows in place first. Micah, I'm going to kick this one over to you first. Your initial reaction, but what's kind of, catching my eye here is the foundational workflows, because I heard you say that at the beginning of the call, that there's some really important framework that needs to be established. What is your reaction to the results here?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think both of these caught my eye when you brought up the poll. And I think the explainability, especially for someone like in my role, all of these tools are not created equal, right? So being able to explain how they're working, what are the risks associated with them, I think is really important. And then, like you mentioned, and I said earlier in the call, making sure that you have the people and the workflows in place, and that you're not getting ahead of yourself by implementing some of these tools without the ability to really understand their, number one, capabilities, but number two, just understanding what the risks behind them are, and some of the data in place. If you have those in place, I think the whole rollout of these various tools makes it tremendously easier.
That's great. Thanks, Micah. And Sam, I'd love to hear from you. With that explainability, model risk, and governance leading the pack here, is that for those that are in that 38% bucket, any advice, anything that is top of mind for you, for folks?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging parts about that topic, and something I'm always trying to find a better way to work on with customer teams, is the financial industry has spent a couple decades getting comfortable with machine learning model risk, right? Understanding what we really mean, what the technical bits are, how we relate to those as a business, how we get the legal team to sort of talk the same language and get comfortable and adopt. And we have similar dynamics here, but a lot of the lessons we learned about supervised machine learning are not really directly applicable here, right? So there are similarities, but often I think that teams are using a playbook or a policy manual about how to do model governance that feels a little off when the model is an LLM, is a generative AI tool. And so it requires the organization to sort of come back to, what do we really care about here? We may not find sort of direct correspondence between the checklist and our policy manual. We need to go back to, what do we actually care about? Why were those elements in the manual? Are we worried about auditability? Are we worried about, adverse decisions affecting people disproportionately? Like, what are the root things, and how can we make sure that those are things we responsibly handle with this tool? So I think it's like a translation learning new paradigm challenge there, and one that the whole world is figuring out right now, right? You're not alone in saying, I don't feel like I have the documents to tell me how to do this.
That's right. It's a journey. It's a journey. Well said, Sam. So what does good look like? So the AI operating model, Sam, could you quickly walk us through moving from, in this illustration, what manual review looks like and kind of converting that into an AI assisted one?
Absolutely. So you probably have lots of processes in your business that you're familiar with, where there's a collection of information, whether this is an investigation or an onboarding, or a fraud alert. You've got the information on hand, and you can express some sort of out of the gate, straight to approval, no problems here, or definitely problematic denials. And then there's this problematic middle bucket of things that need to be manually reviewed. And really what we're seeing as a best practice is just setting up this agent review layer one step in front of your manual reviews to sort of protect your manual review team from the full unmanaged flow of what might hit that yellow step up criteria. And so we see, the advantages we see to this practice of sort of letting the AI agent take a first pass at the queue, is that we hear from a lot of customers that when things get busy, that queue, while we're working through it, some things may end up sitting in there for a day or for 2 days, or, depending on what kind of operation this is. We definitely talk to teams who, aren't excited to talk about it necessarily, but where they never get to the bottom of the queue, right? The queue is growing, and there are things, we do your best to prioritize and work from the top, but we're not getting to all of them. And so if that's the reality, putting this agent step first allows you to be confident that the agent will always review everything that gets opened in this queue within minutes, right? So you are always ensured that you're working to the bottom of the queue every hour of every day, and pulling out of that the things that you really want your team to be spending their time on. So Micah mentioned earlier the sort of organizational cost to review. Really, it's sort of what's the cost of doing the reviews you're glad you did, right? What are the cases that you really want in front of your team so they can sort out what's going on? And that's what the agent can do. You can think about it as triaging, right? There's a big pile, and you need help moving some things that were a little bit fuzzy up into that approval pile and getting that customer on with their process. And then moving some things with clarity and synthesis onto a manual review, where the team can handle those cases that you're really glad their eyes are on.
That's great, Sam. And that leads us right into metrics, right? Because as you and Micah have both shared, perhaps it's not all cases are created equal. And what is the cost of putting certain cases in front of someone? And there are metrics that matter. So this is, a few metrics listed here that matter to leadership. There are certainly more beyond this for those that report to the risk committee and stats to the board. But if we just focus on some of these here, Mike, I want to toss it to you first from a financial organization perspective. Do you report on any of these metrics today? Have you seen, notable gains from some of this reporting, whether it's from other business partners, just up to your leadership? Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So case and alert throughput, I think, is something that's key for us, and we do track that month over month. So I think that's, like I said earlier, a key indicator to really what your team's doing month to month, what their bandwidth consists of, if you're seeing a high throughput in that case. And then I think, secondly, Something we're working to really fine tune, to be frank, but I think it's really critical is that cost per investigation. Like I said, understanding the actual operational costs that entails for all of these investigations. If you're looking at, a review process, what's the time that's really taking and how much is that costing us as an organization? I think it's critical. So having those kind of fine tuned probably are just two that kind of caught my eye initially.
In Micah, the cost per investigation, I've heard for years folks say it's really hard to attack that number because of how many people can be involved in systems. Are you finding the same? Any words of advice that you would share to folks that are in a similar exercise?
Yeah, I wish I could share advice from like, hey, we've got it all figured out. Unfortunately, we're still, I'm kind of going through that process right now. But I think, like you said, there are so many variables. It's who's involved, who's owning that case throughout the process that can sometimes change the case ownership. And trying to figure those out with all the changes that we have going on, I think is difficult. So I wish I had advice outside of, I think there are a lot of variables to it, and we're personally working to kind of fine tune that ourselves.
Fair enough. I don't think you're alone on that journey. So we talked a lot today about the challenges, what it looks like, and what is possible today. Here is one example, real results from the field that are tangible. We'll touch on briefly, and then I'd love for Micah, Sam to give any last closing thoughts before Q&A. So this is real. Some great stats. Sam, walk us through here. In this instance, no human in the loop. In this scenario, what can you share? What does it actually mean? What guardrails made this safe rather than reckless? How do you react to this good story?
Yeah, not to be taken for granted, and again, not out of the box, right? This is not intended to be a skip to don't look at 80% of the work you were doing today. It is a process of identifying the points in your system or in your process where the backlogs are, sort of show good opportunity, are burdensome, and have sort of clear inputs and outputs. And then running a solution in parallel, learning about where there are gaps in what we thought the process was and what the team's actually doing, iterating on that, and then seeing that you're getting to this state of, we have this huge body of work where the agent finished and got it done and came up with an answer in 2 minutes, and 8 hours later, someone on your team got to it and came to the same decision. How do you want to handle that? And once you get to that position of seeing that work being done here correctly, completely, and waiting to be accepted, or sort of looking at the team doing their very best, trying to manage and keep up, it starts to the sort of comfort level of saying, why don't we take all these answers and accept them and design our process around that? But it is, I think we fully accept that to be like, let me see it, let me feel it, and let me be faced with the decision of, why would I have someone keep doing all of this work? All the answers are right here waiting for us. So why would I ask someone to keep doing this? I would much rather they work on the 20% where something really interesting is going on, and make sure that we do a good job of those. And then every time there's a typo in an address that's holding up a mortgage approval, right? Let's just get that back on the right track. Let's move those things through as quickly as we can.
Yeah, very sound advice there. Thank you both for sharing. I am going to jump into questions briefly before we come to the top of the hour here. So the first question that I see is for compliance work. So Sam, this one's going to come to you. For compliance work, are you seeing companies use Claude or ChatGPT or host their own AI internally? And then the secondary part of that is, how much does keeping data in-house drive that choice?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, right? If we said, don't worry, we're sending all of your PII over to OpenAI, and that's all we've thought about it. That would be a real blocker and a real place to stop and consider. What we see is that OpenAI, Anthropic, the other sort of model vendors, foundation model vendors, they understand this enterprise concern, and they are meeting the market with solutions that ensure that the data does not get sent all over town before a decision is made. So solutions like Amazon Bedrock allows all of the data to stay in the same cloud environment where the application is hosted. So if you're already moving your data to a vendor like Alloy, that data can be run through a Claude or ChatGPT model, sort of co-located in that same cloud environment without leaving, and with additional enterprise assurances that that data is not reused or used for further training of those models. So these are not available to your retail user of those tools, but are becoming extremely commonplace in terms of enterprise implementation.
Great. Thank you, Sam. And Micah, this one is going to come to you. You mentioned you came in on the digital product side before moving to fraud. Does that influence how you evaluate AI tools compared to a purely risk and compliance background?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think my mindset is always kind of focused on the end user, whether that's the customer in some cases or whether that's an employee here at the bank, is making sure that yes, this system might be more efficient, but ultimately, is it going to be confusing? Is it going to be kind of clunky? I think all of those things are something to take into consideration, for agents that might be using these systems day in and day out. So it's something that I 100% consider and like to evaluate and make sure that these systems make sense to the average person that's looking at this with zero context.
That's great. Thanks, Micah. Okay. And that brings us to a close. So thank you everyone for joining. Last thing I would share is that the video will be sent, the video on demand will be sent to your registered email within the next few days. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. Thanks everyone. Micah, Sam, thanks so much for joining.